But hey, if you've got a problem with overeating, there might be something that can help you with that. And I'm talking about brain implants. Yes, we're back to the cyborg conversation that we had a few episodes ago, where we're all already cyborg. There's a new study that shows that it could be possible to actually control impulsive behaviors, addictive behaviors, by delivering electrical pulses to a specific part of the brain and either mitigating it or stopping those behaviors altogether. So there was, they did some tests on mice that were kind of like gorging on food and everything like that. And they sent a 10-second electrical pulse to the nucleus accumbens, which is the brain hub for pleasure and reward. And they found that 10-second electrical pulse actually reduced the mice's overeating. Now, of course, they need to, get some money to do some more research and see how this might also affect humans. But this deep brain stimulation, or DBS, is actually already used right now to treat Parkinson's disease.
Right.
So, and this idea of electroshock therapy, as it were, isn't that new, right? Like, there's horror stories, unfortunately, from the past. But, we as humans are a bunch of electrical impulses, right? There's action potentials, neurons are all firing, and sometimes they misfire. And so it would make sense that in order to maybe alter some of the behaviors that are happening within all of our neurons and within all of the stuff of the way that our organs work, that the way to kind of mitigate that or to fix it or to help it along is by electrical pulses, kind of in a way fighting fire with fire, if you will. But in this case, it would actually work. And so they want to do more research because they want to focus on this brain stimulation of obese patients who overeat even when they have gastric bypass surgery. And they want to, they kind of want to see what could happen. Which means that they would have to put some stuff in the people's brains, right? So what do we think? Where do we draw the line? Or do we draw a line? Like, how many man-made objects do we allow inside of ourselves, even if it's for potentially a benefit?
Well, right. And,
that's the question.
This is the thing to think about, at least what really stands out to me is, we talk about how, for instance, like with a drug, this drug has this benefit, right? And really, then we say, well, it has these side effects, though, when really everything is a side effect, right? Like everything is an effect of the drug. It just so happens that, we call the things we like the benefits and the things we don't like the side effects, and those are the negatives. So when we look at something like this brain implant, the question is okay, well, the benefit is that it stops constantly feeding the overeating, excuse the pun there, but that firing of the neurons that says, I need pleasure, I need pleasure, I need this food, I need this food, I need to eat more even though I'm full. And at the same time, though, what are the other effects or the other impacts? Because, like, for instance, with antidepressant medication, say like your Lexapros or things along that line, those drugs, the benefit is that you're not peaking, right? You're not, or actually I should say, like for anxiety, like those helps out where you don't peak with anxiety too high, so it kind of mellows you out. But the problem too is that the detriment is that it takes out the lows too. So it takes out the lows, but it takes out like the bad lows and the bad highs, but it also takes out the good lows in the sense of just being kind of like into a moment in a certain way, or it takes out the good highs of really feeling jovial or ecstatic about something. And so really what it leaves you is basically at this baseline evenness with your emotions. And so how much of that kind of impact are we going to see from these implants? Because now it's not a pill anymore. At least with a pill, you can stop taking it. It's pretty simple. Now, don't go cold turkey, because the effects of going cold turkey on those are horrible for those types of medications. But over time, you can ease your way off until your brain can kind of stabilize itself once again on its own without the impact of those drugs affecting how it works. But these implants are in there. I mean, not like they can't take them out, but do you really want to go through that process after paying all that money and doing everything you just did to get it in?
And how are they even, like, I'd be interested to know, how are they controlled? Like do you have to download an app?
Well, I
I
hope it doesn't go that far.
Man, I'm like, I'm so hungry right now, but I just ate. So hold on, let me turn on this app. Okay, stop. I don't know. It's just, it's crazy to think about. And I think that, yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, right? What is a bad high, by the way? I would, you said something.
Well, like a peak of anxiety. Because that's a bad high, because your right. Adrenaline rushes, you're in fight or flight mode.
I'm thinking a high as joy.
Well, dude, like I'm seeing butterflies and everything has rainbows coming out of it. Yeah, no, not like that. Not that type of high.
Pixel Lily, speaking of firing neurons, your emote is on point. Thank you. That is actually what we wanted that emote to be. And for those of you listening on Podbean, it is an emote that says hype, and on top is a brain with little lightning strikes going into it.
Or coming out of it, depending on
coming out of it.
If you're a glass half full or half empty sort of person, I guess.
Maybe some are coming in and the other ones are going out, and it's sort of like...
That's true.
It's in the middle. It's a nice balance.
And you on Podbean would have to visit us at twitch.tv/MindMineTV to find out.
And on Wednesdays, we're on Twitch at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we will do radio voices just for you.
And RX Mongo makes a good point, too. The brain wasn't made to have outside sources like shocking it. So it's like, what are the side effects of that? Over time, is it going to dull certain feelings that we should be having? Will it impact the instinct to eat when we actually need to eat? I mean, again, because I'm not a neuroscientist and I have no idea really the real specifics or goals of this, because many of the articles that we see is only what the press or the PR team of that organization, company, or individual puts out. So we're really limited in a way to all the specific nitty-gritty bits of it, especially in science, where they want to try to make sure they do full studies first before releasing anything, knowing that many news sources will jump on it and say, hey, did you know that you can have an erection for 8 hours by drinking red wine under moonlight within 15 miles of Cyprus?
But I thought you were supposed to call the doctor after 4 hours.
Yeah, but did you know by drinking red wine under the moonlight? No.
Well, Dr. Casey Halpern, who is... he's an assistant professor of neurosurgery at the Stanford University Medical Center, and he's actually the senior author of the paper about this research. What he said is, imagine obese people or pathologic gamblers who are bankrupt, or even a depressed patient who has the impulse to commit suicide. Some of these things are life-threatening or tremendously debilitating. I suspect not everybody, but you'd be surprised at how many are willing to get these implants because it could improve the quality of life tremendously. Mm-hmm. So, they're, even the people who want to do the research further, their intent is positive. They want to help people, and They want to help, as I was saying, actually in a conversation earlier, there's so much in our world today, right? There's so many stimuli. There's so much information. There's an overwhelming amount of things that you have to do on a daily basis. There's just so much, and you hear so much, and you read so much, and you see so much, and you get pinged and ponged, and there's just a lot to take in. And our brains, we haven't really evolved at the rate that everything else around us has. And so I see why our bodies sometimes just go, blah, never mind. I don't want to work the way you want me to work right now because this is too much. I'm breaking down. And so, yeah, we do need different ways of coping, right? We need some sort of help, whether it's internal, external, a mixture of both, to help us cope with that. Like if I didn't have these glasses, I would be blind. And I could not even be able to read what's on the screen. So, you know, the intent is good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But just like with anything else, there's pros and cons, right? Because instead of, you know, sometimes I look at some of the stuff that comes out, you know, this research, oh, this could improve this, and oh, this and this, and this pill that, and this electrical pulse this, and this robomart that. It's like, but we're not treating the problem. Sometimes that's what I feel like. Like we're just treating the symptoms, and putting sort of a Band-Aid on the problem. Like, oh, you're bleeding. Oh, we'll put this Band-Aid on it. It's like, okay, but like, why are you bleeding? Oh, well, I cut myself. Well, why'd you do that? You know?
How did you do that? Yeah. What really happened here? Understanding the how in order to then progress to a cure rather than like just a temporary fix.
Right. And I mean, you know, if we look back in history, how, you know, how prevalent were these types of behaviors? You know, and we can look at percentages. Like obviously there was less people back in the day, but if we look at percentages, or if we look at the type of people that exhibited these behaviors, you know, and we look at the correlation and the trends that exist now, maybe it's due to the fact of how we live our lives. Maybe it's, you know, maybe what happened in the womb. Yeah, there's so many things that you could look at in order to actually fix the problem. Obviously, it is way easier to treat the symptom, of course.
Right.
But there's also this thing where it's like, oh, stop throwing pills at it. Stop throwing
devices at it. So.
Yeah, you know, stop making things convenient, and let's just look at, well, why are you bleeding? Like you shouldn't be bleeding.
Well, and usually I would say in a situation like this, God, I hope they don't rush it, which I still hope they don't, mind you. Don't get me wrong on that. But so many things I feel like that are in the medical device industry are rushed, and it's all about just getting quick approval and getting it out there and just making money, because again, there's a ton of money from investors that are put into these devices, and these companies feel a huge burden on their shoulders because they need to pay them back within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, funding can get pulled. More money can get tagged onto what they already owe. I mean, there are many factors behind the scenes that we never even think about because we're not usually involved in that kind of situation, right? But these kind of business situations or circumstances really impact also the quality of what's being put out. And so usually I would say, well, my concern is that they're going to rush it, put it out there because they've got to also put money back into the pockets of the investors and everything else. But the nice thing about this specific concept overall is the fact that they're already kind of utilizing it. As we mentioned too, you know, it's not unusual. They're putting it into Parkinson's syndrome patients, for those with terrible Parkinson's, to help kind of quell the kind of shaking that they go through, the physical impact that they receive every single day from the disease, as well as a few other diseases and things that they said that they also do help with already. So really it's taking that bed of information that they've already been using and expanding on it and seeing, well, how else can this be utilized? So that's a little bit more comforting, at least. Again, not saying they shouldn't invest the time into this as well, but what I'm trying to get at is that there is already time and research behind it. And I think that's at least a huge benefit to something like this right now.
Yeah, and RX Mongo brings up a good point too. This also begs the question, could this be abused, right? People figure out ways to manipulate technology all the time. The brain, quote, knows when to release chemicals and fire neurons. Making the brain initiate functions, quote, unnaturally could really be a detriment. And exactly kind of what we're talking about as well is, you know, let's, again, look at the problem, right, and fix that rather than just the symptom of. I know, you know, speaking from personal experience, I used to take a lot of Advil throughout the day a few years ago because I constantly got headaches just all the time. It would just like not go away. And I, you know, I tried drinking coffee. I tried not drinking coffee. I drank soda. I tried not drinking soda. I drank a lot of water. I didn't drink a lot of water. Like I tried all of these different remedies to fix my headaches. And in the end, it was just like the only thing that really worked was I would take, 2 to 3 Advil every 4 hours, and it would be manageable. And after about years of doing this, I'm like, what? Like, I'm just giving Advil and its parent company, which I'm sure is owned by, who knows, Disney at the end of that ladder. I was just giving them a bunch of money, and I mostly still kind of felt crappy. And I really sat down one day with myself, and I was like, what is happening? Why do I keep getting these headaches? Why don't they go away? And I sort of looked at what I did every day, and I tried to actually, instead of how to fix my symptoms, I started looking into like, well, what causes headaches? How do you get them? What are some of the triggers for it? That kind of thing. And I just did a bunch of research until I figured out something that when I made the change kind of helped me. And part of that was, getting a lot more sleep, even if it was trying to nap during the day or something like that, or looking at the monitor less. And I just sort of made these smaller changes by myself. And, I can't say, this one thing fixed it. But here I am 5 years later, and I pretty much take 2 Advil now, maybe once a month. And then that's to say that I don't get headaches still, but they're not as debilitating as they used to be. And I trust that my body, if I start to feel it coming on, like I'll try to change how I'm sitting. I'll go out for fresh air. I'll open a window. I'll look away. I'll close my eyes for a minute or so and just like give my body a bit of time to relax, right? And then I found for me that worked the way I wanted it to work. And again, I was in my mind, I was trying to treat the problem and not the symptom. And in as far as I'm concerned, I have succeeded 90% there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would go through the same thing, actually. I've had multiple dislocations because I am a very tall person, which you can't tell probably on Twitch because I'm sitting down, and probably not on Podbean because you can't see me at all. But I'm about 6'4", and so I have long legs, long arms. And, as I grew up, I had a very quick growth spurt. And so a lot of my ligaments and whatnot could not keep up with the growth. And so they just never strengthened or tightened the way they needed to. And so as I got older, I started getting a lot of dislocations, even in my sleep. Just rolling around, I would dislocate my shoulder. I've dislocated my knees. I've done a lot of work on my joints. And, each time I would just go into the doctor. I get it, basically relocated back in, or it'd be a sublocation. So it would kind of pop out of the joint, pop back in. Sorry for any of you that are squeamish on that. But I would go in, I would take ibuprofen, I'd put my arm in a sling, and then it would just happen again. And it would happen again. So finally, the doctor's like, you know what, you just need surgery done. We can't keep just putting you into this sling, because all that's happening is that your ligaments are actually stretching out more and more each time. So if you thought they were bad to start with, they're getting even worse. And it's just going to keep happening to the point where, you could be standing up and just breathe, and they, that all of a sudden your shoulder just pops out of place.
Oh my God.
He's like, so you really, what's at this point happening is that your ligaments are in the wrong zip code, and we need to get them back into the right zip code. And so, I finally had surgery on one of my shoulders. And I tell you what, it was probably the best decision I've ever made, because it stopped that arm from dislocating. It feels better. I've been able to actually strengthen it a lot better than I could have previously without getting those ligaments tightened up and into place. And so again, it was one of those things where a Band-Aid was being put on it each time. And it's like, well, it's better than what it was, just after the incident.
It's not dislocated anymore. Yes.
Yeah, but it's like, what about the long term though? How does it impact the long term? And sometimes finding that right solution is all you need in order to actually long term fix the issue.
And that's a great point that you made too. It's the long term solution,
right?
Not just feels good right now. Which,
yeah, getting my arm back in place, that was fantastic.
Well, and we as a society, I think, yeah, and as people, I guess, human nature maybe, it is about the short-term fix, right? You want that
I need my
kind of
fix, man. I need my fix.
instant gratification, because if a lion was running after you, you had to get the fuck out of Dodge or you die. So, we're not the short-term fix is a thing that's real.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I mean, I like petting my cat. I get a short-term like ooh out of it, But if I want to keep my cat long-term, I have to stop after a while, otherwise she's going to bite the fuck out of me. So
She won't have any fur left. And we have some great points in chat I want to continue to bring up too. Pixelay says we're speaking ghost in the shell technology in its early stages. Technology which is fascinating but also terrifying. And I can totally see that, right? And both Mongo and Pixelay also mention about, how easy it could be to be abused. And again, just that unnatural factor happening. Actually, and also Lily brings up the fact that we now have a sleeve that will keep the heart beating for an eternity, at least in theory. Again, eternity is a long time and impossible to test, but, wonder if technology could be accessed by someone with less good intentions. So that heart continues to beat until someone decides to push the button and suddenly it stops. We've seen this actually in sci-fi films where, they say, hey, look, we'll put something inside of you to keep you alive, but then you got to pay us every month. And if you don't make that payment, we shut off the device and you're dead. And so, how real could that actually be? At what point do businesses come in and really make this a service-based industry rather than like health-based for your benefit and go, hey, clock's ticking, so's your heart. So you want to pay up or do you want to just end it now?
wait, so businesses are interested in our well-being?
Only as long as they get paid.
They're interested in keeping us just healthy enough so that we can keep giving them money so that we don't die fully, because then there goes their money. But they don't want us to get fully better because then we won't buy their product.
There you go. And let's see, we also see, I'm getting Jack Skeleton vibes from imagining joints falling out.
Oh, God.
That is true. So yeah, no, it's very fascinating to see where the health industry is going and, how will it truly impact? And, I mention this every single time, but I think it's important to note that, with our discussions here, a lot of times there isn't a clear black or white to this. There's a lot of gray area to many of these subjects. And, because so many of these things are in their initial stages, it's hard to say where they'll go. But the big thing is to highlight these and to mention several different pathways that they could be taken down. So that way we feel better prepared when we get closer to the point where we can really see where it's going. So that way we know how to react to it and how it'll impact us and where we can take it from there. If it goes bad, can we steer it to good? If it goes good, can we steer it to better?
That's yeah. That's a very noble
Ideally,
mission.
Ideally. Again, perfect world scenario, just throwing it out there.
Yeah. If we could only have all of the answers, that would be amazing. And all of the fixes.
Right, exactly right. So for this, it could be used for good. It could be used for not so great, but at least it's saving some lives, right? Because especially with like the overeating, people will die. I mean, it is a disease, overeating, and that impulse to want more, that addiction. And they're hoping that this does help those people with severe addictions too. They haven't just lightheartedly said, oh, for anyone with an addiction. So if I say all of a sudden, oh, I have an addiction to atomic warheads. So meaning the candy, not the actual warhead. Can't say that about some people, but that's another story. But let's say an addiction to Airhead candy or to Tootsie Rolls or something like, oh yeah, so plug me in. It's not for that. They do highlight that it's supposed to be meant for an effective treatment to those with life-threatening addictions. Now, again, what their definition of a life-threatening addiction is would be interesting to find out. I'd like to learn more about that.
Right. Where do they draw that line, as it were? And Dynamite TV says, I'll be a grumpy old man who's scared of all the new technology because I know it could kill me. I will say I'm as cynical as it gets. I think, at least from my experience, tend to feel like everything is terrible, and then try to make the best of it as best as I can, hoping that maybe it won't be. But I can imagine all of the worst things that could possibly happen, and often see the worst outcomes and the worst intentions from things. Like when I was reading that thing about Robomart, and all I'm thinking is, oh man, this is gonna change the food industry as a whole. But yeah, it's I mean, technology is exciting, and research is exciting, and trying, progress, right? That's all good stuff. And progress wouldn't necessarily be able to be made in a lot of these areas as well if we weren't a global economy and a global, world at this point.
Oh yeah, we can't shun or look down on technology either. I think some of the films that have come out have really romanticized in a way, like the terrible horrors of what could be with technology, which, don't get me wrong, there are positives and negatives to everything, and things can be pushed too far on either end. So I'm not saying that isn't a potential, but I think because it's romanticized so much, we automatically jump to, oh my God, this is going to zap my brain, and then my brain is going to ooze out of my ear or something like that. Like, it's going to be the end of me. But really, if we look at it now, if it wasn't for technology now, we wouldn't have a lot of the things that we do have that are positives, that are good things, things that keep our hearts beating, things that keep our joints intact and together, things that make it so that way we can face obstacles like depression or PTSD or anxiety or just so many other obstacles that we face on the daily.
Just like a crappy weather day, man. Sometimes that's enough. Just crappy freaking weather.
So, with that, I think it's important to note that where we've come from and what we have now and the positives of that, to see at least the potential of where it could go for a positive route as well. I think it's good to look at the negative and go, well, there's a high potential it's going to get abused. There's a high potential that this could have severe negative effects, but there's also some positive. And luckily they are testing, right? And that's really the big thing. And they're looking to test, as you mentioned, I think, starting this summer is the goal of that, is to try to run actual human tests this summer on people who are facing high obesity rates.
Who also have had the gastric bypass surgery, which has been shown to help in the past. But for these individuals, it has not.
So, there's a lot of opportunity, and I really hope that we do get somewhere where, it can positively impact people's lives. And I mean, I'm curious though again, based on where our health in the health industry will it be covered under an insurance plan? Will people be able to afford it, or will it be only the people making 6 to 7 to 8 figures a year? I mean, it's going to be interesting, because even though we worry about this stuff too, it's like, well, we might not even have access for it for years down the line.